I felt like that I was actually largely a John Mozeliak defender,
Mhm.
especially when I first got here, because I got here, keep in mind, in June 6th of 2022 was my first day at 590 The Fan. So the Cardinals, that was the year that they made the playoffs, lost to the Phillies, blew that series, yada yada yada. But they were in playoff contention the whole way through the season. And the amount of texts that we got just wanting to fire John Mozeliak during a season in which they were competing for the playoffs, I was like, are you guys not aware of how successful his tenure has been? And I know that Cardinals fans, to their credit, have high expectations. And so, crapping out in the first round of the playoffs every single year is not up to par for them. And I get that entirely. But even when they were winning, I was like, you want to fire him like right here and now in the middle of June in a year that might enter the playoffs? Like, what sense does that make? So John Mozeliak is somebody who I think gets treated, I don't want to say unfairly, because he's been around for a while. And so some people think he's just overstayed his welcome. And I kind of get that. So I don't want to say that Cardinals fans are being unfair. But as far as being like borderline cruel to the guy, like that's a guy who I've actually been defensive of. I obviously defended Oli Marmol for the entirety of this season, if not last season, when it came down to the players not executing and him having little to no control over that. So I was very defensive of him. The people who I didn't defend when the Cardinals were losing were the players. I was far more defensive of Mo and Marmol, who are public enemies 1 and 2 when it comes to Cardinals fans. So in that regard, I think I was rather defensive of those two.
Yeah, with Mo's first 10, 11 years were fantastic. I mean, there wasn't even a bad move. There wasn't a signing you could look at. I remember we always joked about Ty Wigginton was the worst signing. It's like, okay, if your worst signing is 2 years, I think it was 2 years and 5 or 10 million, whatever it is, that was for a decade. That's the only thing you could point to. But then if you start talking about Leak and Fowler and the Carpenter extension, the bad trades, yeah, overall, John Mozeliak has been really good. The last 5 to 8 years, not nearly as good as the first decade. And I think to me, it wasn't just about the way that the Cardinals fell apart last year. It's also the minor league system, right? It's like this year. Now, give Palante credit, but for a while there wasn't anybody they could even go to in the minors to give him a start, right? There was nobody that they had trust in. They're bouncing back and forth. Libator. So again, give Palante a lot of credit. But back in the day when the Cardinals were good, there was a freaking pipeline of freaking pitchers, man. Whoever it was, Lance Lynn, Michael Wacha, Carlos Martinez, Shelby Miller, Trevor Rosenthal, Kevin Seagrass, Seth Minnis. Like they just churned these dudes out from double A, triple A to the majors, and they would contribute. And that has not been the case the last couple of years.
And I get that. And like I said, Cardinals fans have every reason to have very high expectations for themselves. And so I'm not going to fault them. Like aside from the Yankees, I think the Cardinals have won the second most World Series ever. Now, I don't particularly care about what happened in the 1930s and 40s, but hey, you got a lot of tradition here, and the fans have high expectations. I'm seldomly going to fault a fan base for having high expectations unless you're just literally one of the worst organizations in sports.